I am fascinated by this. I had to jump on this video. It says, former classmate of Trump shooter reveals new details. As a mental health professional, as a therapist who sees clients every single day, and as someone who found out that this shooter was someone who had two parents who were licensed in the mental health field. They are licensed behavioral health counselors. It fascinates me because I'm wondering what went wrong here. Where were the signs that nobody saw? Where are the signs the parents didn't have any idea on? And what was the mental state of him, both in the past as he grew up and also the present? Let's just see what this classmate had to say. Without further ado. Boy, what new details can we find out about him that start putting the puzzle together? Because this should never happen. And we need to know this is not something normal. Help needs to be gotten so that somebody doesn't get to the point of thinking this is okay.
Our class was actually, they said, like one of the smaller classes. It used to be like 400, 500 like years ago. And our classes were roughly around 300. So we knew each other, but there was just some people you knew, some people you knew closer, but it wasn't too close. So that's how most people were sort of aware of Tom, but nothing too deep relationship-wise. Yeah, he did have a few friends. He wasn't just a loner out there.
Calling him Tom, she must have known him. She must have known about him. She must have been around him. She said, our class was a little bit smaller than the other classes. So, in a class of 300, you could not be friends with everybody, but you could know everybody and know who they are. Class of 500 to 1,000, no chance. But she obviously knew of him and referring to him as Tom. And then also, just kind of discounting immediately. It wasn't like he was a loner. It wasn't like he was outside of anything. So a little different. And I can't find the video of the guy. I saw some quick clip of a guy who was interviewed, I think that went to school with him, that said he was picked on every day. He was bullied really, really bad. And he was a loner and he was by himself. So I don't know how to compare that one to this one. But she seems like she's trying to be genuine and talking about him. And look, let's pay attention to the fact that when it gets to the point of shooting somebody like that or trying to, you have lost your mind. You are not in a sane mind anymore. In fact, sometimes they're either brainwashed, trained, or recruited into doing this. So look, that's a personal opinion. That's not something I know for sure. But you can't be in your normal, sane state of mind thinking, I'm going to go do this, because you have to know, number one, either somebody's going to die or I'm going to die, or both, which is what happened in this case. And I want to pull attention as loudly as I can to this, to say the reason I'm watching this is to understand where this all went wrong for him and what we could do earlier, because early life intervention is the key, and we're not doing enough to get that early life intervention.
He did have a few friends. He wasn't just
had friends,
a loner out there, just like anybody else would. But not a huge friend group. Wasn't like the most popular person in the class or anything like that. In the class of 2022, graduating class. There was like a few cliques, like he, in homeroom, he would play on his computer a little bit more. He was very into that, and he also, he would kind of sit more alone with a few friends at lunch, like anyone else would. And there were like bigger cliques, smaller cliques, kind of just how high school is. Just around like graduation, he was like a few seats away from me, and I remember talking to him and another kid just in the auditorium. It was like, oh, how long are we going to be here type thing, but nothing too hugely notable after that. He was in my homeroom for 8 years, but nothing.
Man, in her homeroom for 8 years, so she definitely knew who he was. Not that she's real friends with him, but she knew who he was. She saw enough of him. My question is, in those 8 years, did you see a different guy? Did you see him change? Obviously, people change over 8 years, and obviously they grow up, they mature, or have adolescence happen. But what did you see that was different in the 8th year versus the first year? And I'm really curious how they got all these people. Like, did they just go through the class book and try to contact people and say, hey, you up for an interview about him? Did you know him? And then start interviewing? And she's like, sure, I'll interview, because she doesn't sound like there's any motive for her to be interviewed. Like, she's just giving information. But if she was in his homeroom for 8 years, it sounds like a small enough town that people had to kind of know each other. Because in larger schools, school districts, you flip around all the time. You're with different people every single year, but not here.
He was in my homeroom for 8 years, but nothing, we didn't have any notable conversations prior to the graduation. I had some classes with him. He was in like higher math courses, and I was like in higher science ones, so we'd have a few, and then history as well, but not too many classes here and there. It's just like any normal person really would. Was always nice to kind of people around him. Just some people kind of don't fit in as much as others, just how the cliques go in high school.
This is kind of an important point to remember, that many times people who end up in this place, this is really extreme to get to the point where you're trying to assassinate someone like this, but many people are unnoticed. They might be quiet, they might be more to themselves. Are they an introvert? Or are they just kind of more reclusive and they want to have their space, and they don't seek out time, attention, and friend groups like that. So sometimes that can go unnoticed. Here's the link though. They graduated in 2022. It's 2024 now. What happened in those 2 years then? I'd like to hear about high school like she's talking about, but I'd like to hear people who were in touch with him from 22 all the way to 24 and wondering, where did his views change? Because when you get out of high school and all of a sudden you go from 18 to 20, that's a very big difference in where you were in high school, from where you were in high school. And he could have been unnoticed. He could have been depressed. He could have had personal and mental health issues when he was in high school. He could have, maybe not, who knows? There had to be something though, probably. But maybe it wasn't exacerbated. Maybe it wasn't huge, because you're in this box of high school. And then when you get out and you're free and you start to explore more, you start to do more things, you start to meet people, all of a sudden, somebody like that is susceptible to being hooked into something. And I just wonder if he had a big shift from high school into this last 2 years. And I'm also wondering his mental health history. Did he ever see a therapist? Did he ever talk to somebody about this? My wife is telling me she saw something about him seeing his guidance counselor being interviewed, and he was a great guy and he was fine. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'll bet he saw him once a year. And she's like, yep, that's what he mentioned. We saw him once a year. That's what guidance counselors do. They don't ask how you're doing and how life is.
Kind of don't fit in as much as others, just how the cliques go in high school. It was shocking, because, it's shocking to hear someone from your high school, that you knew of, would do something as tragic as that. But I actually originally thought it was like a relative, because I heard Thomas is not really a name he usually goes by. He goes by Tom or Tommy. But when I heard the news, I was like, oh, I know the last name of Crooks. Like, I went to high school with him, and then knowing he's from Bethel, and then he was close.
It has to be a shock. I went to school with this person, and now I'm hearing about them on the news that they actually did this. Almost like a denial or a disbelief. Like, really? So that would tell me, from her mind, something happened to him from high school to now. And getting into his mind, it's who was he with? What was he filling his brain with? Where was his time spent? And how was his mental state from the time he graduated high school until 24? Did he go to school? Did he have a job? What was his life like? And what was his social life like? And sometimes when people are more reclusive, or they're to themselves, or they're on social media a lot, they can get drawn into that world, and his mind can go anywhere. You start thinking a lot of crazy thoughts.
High school with him, and then knowing he's from Bethel, and then he was close down the street from me. It was just completely. I wasn't even awake yet, and I heard all that. And I was supposed to go to the rally, and it was just.
Wow.
Thankful.
Oh my goodness.
I feel really bad for families that had to endure that, and I'm sure some are going through some nightmares from that, actually. But
PTSD.
All of Bethel Park. This is
Lots of trauma.
like a community that we're all really close, family orientated. good Americans and great citizens, especially like through Bethel Park, through their high school. I mean, we have different things like the music department, and we're also close with that. Because of that, it's like an experience where you're like, wow, this did not seem to add up to happen in Bethel Park. So our hearts go out to the families that were affected in this. Maybe other people in the school that I thought would probably more be capable of such a thing, and he's definitely not one of them I would think of. But it's also maybe because of the fact that he didn't talk to a lot of people, so you don't really know what's going on inside their heads or anything.
That's what we were talking about just a second ago. You know, she's like, if I was going to pick somebody out to do this from our high school, I'm not sure it'd have been this guy, at least the guy I knew. And that I want you to know doesn't mean this guy was this guy his entire life. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes they have, you know, mental and emotional struggles from the time they're born all the way up. But a lot of times they reach a breaking point. And to me, it's like when you get into adulthood and you haven't gotten the help you need. And I don't know if he was using any substances or if he was drinking alcohol. I don't know what he was doing. Maybe not. And if that wasn't the case, that's fine too. You compare that with any mental and emotional struggles. And I just wonder what the parents were noticing or what their communication was with him to not see something coming, because she's saying, this is just not that guy I knew. Like, yeah, he was to himself, but it could have been maybe because he wasn't interacting with people. He stayed to himself. You get out of high school, remember this, you're in high school, whether you're a part of a group or not, you're in this big bubble with people. So you're kind of in this, like working in a company, in a business, right? You're with other coworkers, you're with other students. Then you get out of that. I don't know if he kept going to college or not, but when you get out of that, you're all of a sudden in the world and you're not around people as much. So you have to have some kind of self-worth, some kind of ego strength inside to say, I'm okay, I can make it. And if I'm hurting or I'm struggling, I need to get help. And I just don't know that he got any help.
A normal, quiet person, nice to anyone who he interacts with, never said anything harshly political like that. So that's why this is such a hard thing to unpack, because no one really knows. No one in the community really knows. We had American politics class. It was half a year, senior year, and he's never made any outward political views. Nothing you could think of. This could have been something that developed in the past 2 years after, came out of high school, but we're not really sure. No one's truly sure. Yeah. I know some people.
That's what I'm talking about with what happened in these last 2 years, because everything she's saying is adding up to, yeah, he might have had his struggles. Yeah, he might have had quirks here and there. Yeah, he might not have been the most popular or the most socially connected, but that's okay. It wasn't like he was outspoken. It wasn't like he was a radical that was, professing these extreme views, and he was all into politics and trying to, overthrow the government or trying to talk bad about he wasn't doing any of that. So that tells me that something after high school, and as a therapist, when people come into my office, is one of the first things I ask, give me your history. Like, tell me about your life. And then secondly, when did things shift? And if he came into my office before this thing ever happened, I'd say, well, what was high school like? And then I'd be like, what was the last 2 years like since you've been out of high school? Who have you been around? What's your routine? What do you kind of fill your brain with when it comes to day to day, when it comes to social media, when it comes to people, when it comes to, making yourself feel good as a person? What do you fill your brain with? And what do you occupy your time with? I think something happened in these last 2 years where he got kind of hooked into either groups or people or a belief system that started bending in one direction, and he kind of took that and ran with it and maybe got more and more isolated with it and just did not communicate a whole lot of that with other people in his circle, probably because he knew Bethel, it's a small town. These people don't want to hear any of my views. They're all weird. They're different. And so he just kept going. I just wonder, I keep going back. Did he get any therapy? Did his parents notice anything off about him? Did they communicate with him about that? They're licensed behavioral counselors. Did they do any of that? And then lastly, was there anything in people he's encircled himself with? Like, this is a classmate, not a good friend of his that hung out with him, but she was around him. Is there anybody that's been around him in the last 2 years that could speak to who he was at the end?
Came out of high school, but we're not really sure. No one's truly sure. Yeah. I know some people were saying obviously he was relentlessly bullied and a loner. I personally wasn't aware that he was being bullied. I know it's hard for school districts to really get a handle on that sometimes. I would hope Bethel would get a handle on that if that did happen. I don't know if it happened a little bit, but if it would happen a lot, I feel like I would have noticed a lot more.
That's true.
So I don't really think he was a loner or bullied a lot. Every time I'll try to get my mind off of it, I get contacted with more reporters, and it just brings me all back, and it's
especially
sad.
now
like
that she's spoken
I
out.
was so nauseous on Sunday hearing about it because you don't think something like that would happen so close, something so natural to come so close to home. So like I could try to speak for all of Bethel Park. We just really want to move on from this because it's not something normal for us. It was quite an anomaly for us.
They don't want to have, she's speaking for everybody, they don't want to have their name, their town, their life there attached to this, because what happened here and who he was not an example of this town. And I think that's what she's saying is we really just want to move on. We want to be the town and the city and the place and the society and the culture we are. And it's just so far out of who we are as people. And that's why I want people not to judge so quickly. That my judgment, if it comes anywhere, comes at home. And that's not being harsh towards the parents. It's saying, I just haven't heard from them. I wish we could hear from them to see what in the world they noticed in hindsight was going on here. Or maybe they noticed for real and either tried to pay attention to, tried to get him help, tried to reach him, tried to break through to him, or didn't, and just didn't ever see it coming. I wish we could get a video on that, because as a mental health person here, she sounds super credible. She sounds like, she's being as honest and fair as she can. And she also said if he's being bullied, which everybody in high school, it seems like gets some kind of bullying or picked on, if he was, and I hate that because I want schools to stamp out this stuff. If he was, then she said, if it was extreme, I think I would have noticed it because I was around all different kinds of people. So my next step is find me a video of an interview with the parents or a history of someone who was in his life since high school. Is there an interview with somebody who's known him since 2022 and has been around him? Because I would love to see that. Remember, leave your comments. Let me know what you think. I cannot wait for the next one because I want to get to the bottom of the mental health behind this. What happened to this guy so that we can stop the next one from happening before it ever happens. Hang in there. Mental health matters. We'll see you on the next Reaction Therapy.